Welcome back everybody to another Python tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to go over how to create interactive maps with ipyleaflet. If you would like more information on ipyleaflet, you can go to python.org, go to the Python package index, and type in ipyleaflet. We'll choose the first option here. Then let's click on Homepage. If you scroll down, you'll get to see some examples. Further down the page, we have installation instructions. And then here we have the full documentation. Let's click that link. And in the documentation, you have a whole bunch of examples on the different types of maps that you can create. A couple more notes before we get started. ipyleaflet is suited to work well with Jupyter notebooks. Also, ipyleaflet is somewhat similar to Folium, which is another mapping package that you can use to create interactive maps. And a note on the installation of the ipyleaflet package. If you install the package while your notebook is open, go ahead and close it down and restart it just to make sure that everything loads and works properly. Let's go ahead and make our screen just a little bit bigger and move on to our first example. In this example, we're going to go over how to create a basic map. The first thing you want to do is go ahead and import ipyleaflet. Then to create the map, you use ipyleaflet.map. Put in your zoom level and assign that to a variable. Then to display the map, go ahead and type out your variable and run it. And you can see we get our basic map. To zoom in, click the plus. And to zoom out, click the minus. You can also create your map using from ipyleaflet import map. If you do that, then you can use map without the ipyleaflet in front. Put in your zoom level, assign it to the variable, and then type out the variable to display the map. Another way to display your map is to use display and put the variable inside the display round brackets. Let's run it. And you can see we get our basic map, in this case with a zoom level of 4. If you want to move the map around, just click and hold and drag. Another thing you can do is to add a center argument here, which will center the map based on latitude and longitude coordinates. And we will go over an example of that in just a little bit. The next thing we want to do is to go over some of the different types of maps that you can create. So we have a whole bunch of examples here, and to display the different types of maps, we have some radio buttons here that we're going to go through in just a second. We're not going to go into detail on this code here because we just wanted to show you some of the different types of maps that you can create. However, if you wanted to create something like this, you could use the ipywidgets package. Before we go over the different types of maps, you'll notice that we're using the base maps to create these. And there's about 16 of them, and you can see all of those are listed here. So we go from basemaps.cardodb.positron all the way down to basemaps.stamen.watercolor. I have yet to find a comprehensive list of map types. However, here we have a whole bunch of examples that should be enough to get you started. Now to go over these examples, let's go ahead and shrink our screen just a little bit. So for our first example, this is the positron. Next we have dark matter. Then we have the world street map. Now you'll notice on this one, we've put in a center argument with the latitude and longitude coordinates and a zoom level of 10. Next up, we have DeLorme. Then we have World Topo Map. Here is World Imagery. Next is Nat Geo World Map. Then we have the Hike and Bike. We've gone ahead and zoomed in on this one a little bit. Then we have high to full and night. With this one, you can see the lights at nighttime. Let's go to Modus Terra. Then we have Mapnik, Hot, Open Topo Map, Toner, and Watercolor. Okay? So again, if you want to create those maps, one way that you can do that is when you're creating your map, put in base maps, and then put in the desired type of map, like we've done here. Let's make our screen bigger again. For our next example, we're going to go over how you can put some marker icons on your map. For this, we're going to use from ipyleaflet, import map, and marker. We're also going to use the geocoder package. If you don't have the geocoder package, you can install that by going to python.org and then go to the Python package index and type in geocoder. And this geocoder package will help us to get the latitude and longitude coordinates for whatever address we plug in. So here we've used geocoder.osm, I believe that stands for OpenStreetMap. As a string, we've put in our address. We assign that to location, and let's go ahead and view that to see what this location information will look like. Okay, so you'll see we have a whole bunch of information here related to the address, and part of that includes the latitude and the longitude, and we're going to use those coordinates. So we have our location. Then to create the latitude and longitude, we use the location.lat and location.long. We put that in square brackets and we assign that to lat long. The next thing we've done here is we've gone ahead and created our map and we put in a center argument with the latitude and longitude. Now we're going to create our markers, and to do that we use marker. We imported that here. Inside the marker round brackets, we assign latitude and longitude to the location, and we give it a title. Then we reference our map, and we use add layer, and we put in our marker that we created here. Then we type out the map variable name to display the map. Let's run it. And you can see we get our marker, which is the address for the San Diego Zoo. If you wanted to plot multiple markers on your map, you can do that as well. So let's go up to the documentation. And then if you go here to marker cluster, there is some example code of how you can create a cluster of markers and plot them onto the map. And it looks like that. Also, if you have a pandas data frame and you want to use the data in that data frame to plot some locations, you can do that as well. So here we've gone ahead and imported some data using the Vega Datasets package. Once again, if you don't have the Vega Datasets package, you can go to python.org, then go to the Python package index and type in Vega Datasets, and that will give you installation instructions. The data frame that we're using from the Vega datasets is airports. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. This is what the data frame looks like. So you can see we have the airport name, city, state, and the latitude and longitude. This data set was quite large, so we've gone ahead and shrinked it down just a little bit. And we're just going to use the first 25 records. So we've gone ahead and created our data. Then here we've created our map. Next, we've gone ahead and looped over the data frame, and we're going to use the latitude and the longitude for each marker, and then reference our map, and then add the markers. And as always, to display the map, we just reference the map variable. So let's run it. And you can see here we have all of the markers for our different airports. Now you'll notice when we hover our cursor over each marker, we get some information for each airport, and that includes the name, city, and state that we created here and assigned to the title. Next up, let's go over how you can create a GeoJSON layer and then overlay that onto your map. Before we get started, let's go over one way that you can create a custom GeoJSON file that can be used with ipyleaflet. So if you go to geojson.io, here you can create custom GeoJSON files. So for example, if you click on Draw a Polyline, here we have the state of Indiana, and this isn't going to be real pretty, but let's go ahead and create the outline for the state. And you can see over here on the right, we have the JSON code associated with this Indiana shape outline. Then we can go to Save as GeoJSON. And you can see that that has downloaded into our Downloads folder. Then you can use that file with ipyleaflet. Now I've already gone ahead and created this outline of Indiana, and it's on the desktop. Here. Now to pull that in, we can use this code here. So we use with open, we put in the path and the file name as F, we use json.load F, and we assign that to GeoJSON Indiana. Now for the json.load, we imported that here. The next thing we do is we go ahead and we create our map. Then here we create the GeoJSON layer with the style attributes that we want. Now notice that we use GeoJSON that we imported here. We assign the GeoJSON Indiana to the data. We created that here. And then these are all different types of style attributes, and you can set those to whatever you want. The next thing we do is we add the GeoJSON layer to the map. So we reference the map, add layer, and we put in the layer. And of course to display, we use display, and we use our map variable. Let's run it. And you can see we have the overlay of the shape of Indiana on our map. One more note before we move on. If you have some shape files that you would like to convert to GeoJSON and use those as layers for your ipyleaflet maps, you can do that. One way you can do that is by using the QGIS application. So what you would do is you would pull in those shape files and then convert them and then export them. And I think we'll go over that in a separate tutorial. Let's move on to our next example. For this example, we're going to go over how you can create a choropleth map that looks something like this. Now before we go over this example, let's go back up to our documentation. And let's go to the example for the choropleth map. So if you want to experiment with how to create a choropleth map with ipyleaflet, it might be best to start with the example in the documentation. So let's quickly go over this. So here they have imported all the modules. Here there is a function that will load the data, and there's two types of data that is going to be loaded in. The GeoJSON data and some values data. In this case, it's unemployment, that will correspond with the GeoJSON geographic data. Next, you can see here they have converted this unemployment CSV data into dictionary form. And that dictionary will be the state as the key and the unemployment values as the value. Then, to create the choropleth layer, they have used ipyleaflet.choropleth, and they have assigned the GeoJSON data to the geodata argument. Then they have assigned the unemployment data to the chorodata argument. Then here for the color map, they have used a specific scheme. That will end up looking like this, which looks like a combination of red, orange, and yellow. And then here are some styling attributes. Next, they've gone ahead and created the map and added the layer and displayed the map. Now you'll notice down here there's some more information. So let's go over this. Because when you want to pull in your own data, it can get just a little bit tricky. So you'll notice it says the choropleth takes geodata and chorodata arguments. The geodata is the Geo JSON dictionary that looks like this. The chorodata is a dictionary that takes ID, and this part can be especially important because if in your data you don't have the ID, you may have to add it. And that is what is in common between your GeoJSON data and your values data, and that helps link the two up together to create the choropleth map. So it says the chorodata is a dictionary that takes ID from features as key and float as value in order to build the color map. Okay, now let's move on to our example. So for this example, we've gone ahead and used the example in the documentation as a starting point. Now notice here, we've gone ahead and we've loaded in our GeoJSON data. And this data is on our desktop. It is the Geo JSON Indiana counties file. Here. The next thing we did here is we loaded the data associated with the GeoJSON. And instead of unemployment, in this case, we're just using population by Indiana county. This starts off as a CSV. However, we use pandas, read CSV, and this will become a data frame. The next thing we've done here, just like in the documentation, is we have created a dictionary with the geography and the data. So this will be the county as the key and the population as the value. Now this here was the part that was just a little bit tricky. So as we mentioned, when we went over the documentation, you saw that it said that you have to have an ID. And I believe that ID is the common point between your data that helps link it up together. So for example, you have your GeoJSON data, and then you have your population data. And you want those two data sets to be able to work together so you can get your choropleth map. Now in order to do that, we had to add a feature ID with the county name to the GeoJSON file. And to do that, we've used this code here. The next thing we've done here is we've gone ahead and we've created a color map scale. And this will be the choropleth map colors and the corresponding value ranges. Here we've gone ahead and created our choropleth layer. We assigned the GeoJSON data to the geodata and the choromap data to the chorodata. Here for the color map, we've assigned our color map that we created here, and we put in some styling attributes. Next, we've gone ahead and created our map. Then here, we add our choropleth layer to the map. Here, we're going to display the color map legend, which is right here. And then finally, we display the map. So let's go ahead and run it. So here we have our choropleth map with the Indiana counties by population. Now the largest county is purple, and that is right here. The next three largest counties are blue, and those are here, here, and here. The next largest counties are in green, and you can see as it goes down, by color, it gets smaller and smaller. So the orange counties would be smaller than the green, the yellow counties would be smaller than the orange, and the counties with the lowest population are in gray. Now another thing you might want to do when you're creating your choropleth map is to go ahead and look at the data. So for example, if you wanted to see the GeoJSON data, you can do that. Now a little warning, if you look at the GeoJSON data, it's quite large. However, when you scroll down, you'll notice here we have the ID, and that's the part that we had to add. You can also take a look at your population data frame just to get an idea of the data that you're working with. And you can also look at the ChoroMap data. And this is the dictionary with the county name and the corresponding population. Next up, let's move on to our heat map example. Before we go over the specific example that we've created for the heat map, once again, just like we did for the choropleth map, let's take a look at the example in the documentation. Before you create a custom heat map with your own data, you might want to start out with this example here and get familiar with how they have created this. Okay, let's go over our specific example. We've gone ahead and we have imported the geocoder module, and then we have imported ipyleaflet. The first thing we did is we created some code to get the location data for 10 of the largest cities in the US. And we're going to use this to help us get the latitude and longitude for these cities. So to do that, we use the geocoder.osm and we put in the city. And for each of those, we have assigned them to their corresponding city variables. Then here, what we wanted to do is to create the latitude and longitude and intensity for each dot on the heat map. Let's use the New York City as an example. Here we have the New York City latitude, then we have the New York City longitude, and then here we have the population, which will correspond to the intensity for the heat map dot. And we have divided that by 1,000 just to make it just a little bit more readable. Now notice that we have divided all of the populations by 1,000. The next thing we did here is we created a list of the cities with the latitude, longitude, and intensity. Then we can go ahead and create our map. And then here we create our heat map layer. To do that, we use ipyleaflet.heatmap. We assign the large cities list that we created here to the locations argument. Then here you can control the radius and the blur for your heat map dots. Next, we add the heat map layer to the map, and then we display the map. So let's go ahead and run it. And you can see we get our heat map. Now this list is in order from largest population to lowest. So we can see New York City is the largest, and you can see the intensity and the size for the New York City heat map dot. It's large and the colors are dark. Now the next largest city is Los Angeles, and you can see that's right here. Next is Chicago, and you can see that's here. And as the population numbers go down, the intensity of the heat map dot goes down as well. Next up, let's go over how you can add some different controls to your maps. For our first control example, we're going to add a full screen control to this map. So to do that, we create our map, then we create the control. In this case, we're going to use Fullscreen Control. And we imported that here. Then all you have to do is add the control to your map, and then display the map. So let's run it. And you can see we have our full screen control right here. Let's click it. And our map goes full screen. Now to exit the full screen, we can click it again. If you would like to add a draw control to your map, you can do that. Go ahead and import ipyleaflet, and in this case, we've used from ipyleaflet import draw control. We have created our map. Then here, we create the draw control. Here we've gone ahead and added the draw control to the map. And if you want some extra options for your draw control, then you can do that with code similar to this. In this case, we have added the ability to draw a circle, and in this case, we've added the ability to draw a rectangle. And then here we have displayed the map. So let's go ahead and run it. And over here on the left, we have our draw controls. So if you want to draw a polyline, you can do that, like that, and then click Finish. If you want to draw a polygon, you can do that, and click Finish. Here we've drawn a square and a circle, and this is a variation on drawing a circle. If you want to edit your shapes, you can do that. Just click here, and then you can edit your shapes. And then click Save. If you want to delete and clear all, you can do that. Okay? Next up, let's go over how you can create a measure control. So for this, we're going to use from ipyleaflet import measure control. We've gone ahead and created our map. Then here we create our control. We're going to position this in the top left, and we want the line for the measurement to be red. For the unit, we'll use miles. Go ahead and add the control to your map, and the finished line color will also be red. Let's go ahead and display the map. So here we have our measure control. All you have to do is hover over it and click Create a New Measurement. Let's say we want to go from the West Coast to the East Coast. Click Finish Measurement, and you can see we get the measurement in miles. If you want to delete it, you can do that. Next up, let's say you wanted to create a split map control. Well, you can do that as well. One way that you can do that is to use the split map control. For this example, we're also going to import base maps and base map to tiles. So here we've gone ahead and created our initial map. The next thing we're going to do is to create the two map layers, one for the right side and one for the left side. For the right side, we're going to use the base map to tiles that we imported here. Then we use base maps, Esri, World Street Map. For the left layer, we're going to use the Earth at Night. The next thing we did here is we've gone ahead and created our split map control. Then we put in the left layer and the right layer. Go ahead and add that control to your map and display it. And you can see here we have our split map. Okay, so for our last few examples, we're going to go over how you can add some interactivity to your maps. And we won't go into too much detail on these examples. We just wanted to show you some of the cool things you can do with ipyleaflet and ipywidgets. So in this example, we're going to pull in some earthquake data, and then we're going to use a slider to plot those different locations of the earthquakes over a certain period of time. So let's just briefly go over our code. So here, we've gone ahead and pulled in the earthquakes data. The next thing we did here is we created the slider using ipywidgets. Then here we've gone ahead and created our map, and then we've gone ahead and displayed the map. The next thing we did is we've gone ahead and created a function that will plot the locations. The next thing we did here is we used the ipywidgets interact that will help create the interactivity for our map. So let's go ahead and run this. And if we click on our slider and we scroll over to the right, or you can use your keyboard, as time goes along, it will plot the different locations for those earthquakes over that period of time. Now you'll also notice down here we have the data associated with each earthquake, including the magnitude. So let's just go ahead and use our keyboard for the slider. And as we use the slider, you can see that the locations for the earthquakes are plotting, and down here, the data is updating. Now for certain dates, you have a whole bunch of data. Okay, so that's just one example of how you could add some interactivity to a map. Let's go over 2 more examples. In this example, we're going to use our heat map example from earlier. However, we're going to add some interactivity that will allow us to change the radius of the intensity dots. Let's go ahead and run it. So you can see here we have our radius, and it starts off at 10. Now notice that the intensity for the heat map dots is quite low. Let's go ahead and increase it and see what it looks like. So we've gone from 10 to 25, and you can see there's quite a large change. Let's continue. Now here we've gone all the way up to the max of 50, and you can see that the intensity for the dots makes them quite large and changes the color. Okay? Now let's go over one last example. And in this example, what we want to do is to put in an address in our text box and then click the button and plot that on the map with a marker. Once again, we're using ipywidgets. So let's make sure that we put that in. And we have imported this earlier, so we're good to go. However, let's just go ahead and make sure we import that again. Here we've gone ahead and created our text widget. Here we've created our function that will plot the locations. And then here we use the ipywidgets.interact manual, and that will create the interaction between the function and the widget. So here we have some addresses that we're going to use as our test. Let's go ahead and put in our first address in the text box and click Run Interact. So here we have our first marker, which is located near the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. For our next one, let's go ahead and take the address for the San Diego Zoo. Let's paste that in and click our button. And you can see we get the marker near the San Diego Zoo. Let's do one more test. And this is the address near the Apple headquarters. Let's run it. And you can see we get our marker in the correct spot. That's all we have for this tutorial. Join us again next time.